And we are live. Hooray, hooray. So we'll just wait for folks to come in.
And this is our sanctuary, the painting we draped, and then put this temporary painting over it. And I'll put up a picture of what it looked like before that.
I like your cross.
That was the first attempt to cover the old painting. They figured they'd just put the cross in front of the painting. That way it would distract.
That would be a lot going on up there. Because don't you have that kind of gothic-y Gyarados thing too?
Yes. Let me get the full. Yeah, this is the Christmas picture one, which will come up in a second. Now, are you guys back to in-person worship at all, or?
Not yet. Hoping for June. Michigan is the most COVID-ridden state in the nation right now.
Yes, we're still number one.
So while we're waiting for people to come in, this is, let's see, we've got 9 right now. Folks are arriving.
A baker.
A baker is here. A singular baker.
A singular baker.
Oh, where did Gray go? There. Okay.
Yeah, I got him.
All right.
Am I? Yeah.
Yeah, you're there.
And so this is what the painting what the altar looked like before.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay. Floaty white Jesus.
Surrounded by white disciples, is that?
Yeah. So as you all are coming in, we were Yeah, we were explaining to Gray about how we ended up with our beautiful sculpture, and they've been going through a similar process at their church with problematic images behind the altar. So why don't we get started? I'd like to introduce the Reverend Gray Maggiano. He is from Memorial Episcopal Church in Baltimore, and I reached out to him very excited because I saw on Twitter that his church voted at their annual meeting to create a $150,000 reparations fund and to begin the work.
500,000.
500,000 reparations fund, and to really dig into the work of repairing and working on justice in their neighborhood. Anybody else having trouble hearing me? I'm getting a note that I'm hard to hear. Can you hear me? I've been having microphone troubles all day. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you without a problem.
Okay, well, you're in the Zoom. I'm wondering about the YouTube.
Well, if we can hear you, though, it's probably not your mic.
Okay. Try turning up your volume, Marty, and see if that works. But anyway, we're going to get started with Gray, and I've just asked him to talk about how Memorial came to make this great leap of faith and what their process was and where they are now. So take it away, Gray.
Thanks, Kit. Appreciate it and appreciate the invitation. It's great to be with you all on this Sunday afternoon. I'm coming from, at least virtually, our sanctuary here at Memorial. Memorial Episcopal Church was founded in 1860. We're in Baltimore, Maryland, and we are, in the downtown, what is now sort of the downtown core of the city. But when we were built, we were a suburb, and the city kind of gradually expanded out to meet us. We were founded, like many churches, by another Episcopal parish that was less than a mile down the road. And currently in Baltimore, We have upwards of 27 Episcopal churches in the city. Within a mile of my church are 7 other Episcopal churches. So it is, you almost, if you're Episcopalian in Baltimore, you almost get your own church on a Sunday morning. It's and so when I arrived here in 2016, the question that we started with was not a question about racial justice or redlining or white supremacy or reparations. It was, how is this church going to survive? We had a dwindling congregation. We are almost entirely white in a city that is 70% African American, in a neighborhood that's 50% African American. And so I just started asking the question, like, where can we grow? We have no parking. As I was telling the group earlier, the city grew up around us. So we are surrounded by beautiful 18th or 19th century row homes in a really wonderful, beautiful part of the city, but there's no parking lot. About half our congregants walk on a Sunday morning to church, including myself and our family. And so, we're not going to get a lot of people driving in from outside the city to come to services on a regular basis. How can we grow? And that would mean that we need to become a much more diverse congregation, that we need to reach out to our Black neighbors across the way and see if they're interested in coming and being a part of the church. So the first question we asked was a very simple question of, why is this church that is so claims to be and it has been so active in social justice causes for the last 50 years, still so white in a city that's so Black? And so that was the beginning of our questioning. And so the first thing we did was we looked back at our own history. I'm always someone who thinks it's important to start with good news. So we started looking at the last 50 years of the church and really celebrating all the ways that we had been involved in justice related matters in that time frame. We were the first church in Maryland to have a female priest. We were the first church in Maryland to have an openly gay priest. We were the first church in Maryland to do a gay blessing in the 80s and to do a same-sex union in the 90s, and then to have the first legal gay marriage in Maryland as soon as it was possible. We were very active during the HIV/AIDS epidemic as a resource for folks. Very active in women's rights movements, in the anti-war movements. We helped people avoid the draft in Vietnam. So you can kind of go back and find all these different ways that we had been so concerned and active in issues of justice. And so we kind of laid all this out, and we celebrated the history and that so many people had come to Memorial because of this story. And that's what drew them in. It was a church that really lived out its values, and they wanted to be a part of something like that. So then we kind of had to say, okay, well, what happened before that? What happened? What was 1968 and before like here? And nobody much wanted to talk about that. But it didn't take too much digging to realize that throughout the 50s and 60s, and certainly before that we were a very segregated congregation. We resisted integration till the very last minute. We didn't have a Black member of the church until 1969. We actually threw a rector out in the 50s because he tried to integrate the church. And rather than allow him to stay, he was pushed aside, and he and the associate were kicked out. And then we started going kind of farther back and realized that, not surprisingly, a church founded in 1860 in Baltimore, which is, Maryland was a southern state. They fought for the Union because the Union occupied the state, but Baltimore was a southern city, and there were many enslaved Blacks in the city before the war and during the war. It also had the largest population of free Blacks in one of the largest populations of free Blacks in the country. So certainly, and the largest population south of the Mason-Dixon line. So it's a little idiosyncratic in that way. But we discovered that the first 9 rectors of the parish, 8 fought for the Confederacy or supported the Confederacy directly. Only 1 did not, and I'm only the 16th rector, so that means, half of the rectors of our church fought for the Confederacy, and that legacy didn't stop until 1929. So that someone in the pulpit every Sunday morning had a direct connection to the Confederate Army until the 1930s. We were the home of the Daughters of the Confederacy, the Sons of the Confederacy, the Confederate Veterans, organizations. All of that sort of grew out of our church, and so we knew all this stuff. And then this is the part where a lot of churches, a lot of institutions kind of stop, and because it's one thing to name all the truths, it's another thing to act on them. And we were as guilty as any other institution of not wanting to do anything. We had a lot of book studies. We read a lot of books. Episcopalians love books. We did retreats. We did vestry retreats. We did parish retreats. We had guest speakers come in. But we could not come to agreement on what the best path forward was. We knew that something like reparations was necessary, but we didn't really have a sense for what that could look like or why we would do it. And we knew that there were problems with, our name and the artwork on our walls and these giant plaques in the rear of the church of the founding rectors. But all this was, for people who loved their identity as Memorialites, those were things that began to sort of pick at their identity. And they had no problem challenging the past, but the pieces of the past that were still connected to them, they didn't want to let go. And so we were kind of stuck. And then in the summer of 2019, our deacon, Natalie Conway, who is an African-American woman, born and raised in Baltimore City, grew up as Episcopalian in the city. She and her family were doing some genealogical research, and they discovered that their ancestors were enslaved at Hampton Plantation, which is just outside Baltimore, and that the family, the Howard family, who ran the Ridgely Howard family, who ran the plantation, were the same family who founded our church. And the founding rector, Charles Ridgely Howard, was born at Hampton Plantation about the same time as the great-great-grandmother of our deacon, obviously in very different circumstances. We actually believe that when their parents, Sophia Go Ridgely and I'm blanking on the Howard name, sorry, when they got married, that the Howard family gave an enslaved woman as a gift to the couple to be the sort of nursemaid for the son, Charles Ridgely Howard. And that sort of changed everything because now it was right in front of our faces. And Natalie was trying to figure out if she could stay at Memorial, how that was going to feel for her. A week after that, another member of the church, Steve Howard, came to me and Natalie and said, I'm a descendant of the Ridgely Howard family, and I think we need to talk. So now we had in our midst a descendant of the founding family and a descendant of the people that were enslaved by the family, and both a challenge and an opportunity, I think, to practice reconciliation right there in our midst. And so we began doing a lot of just listening to each other and sharing with each other in small groups and in large groups. We did a visit out to the plantation with Natalie and Steve, and Natalie constructed a libation service, pouring out of holy water to honor those that had gone before, and invited everyone to participate in that. And then she and Steve poured the last bit of holy water on the ground as an act of reconciliation between the two of them. And we did this in conjunction with St. Catherine of Alexandria Episcopal Church. St. Catherine of Alexandria is a historically Black church that's 8 blocks away from our parish. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that why they're only 8 blocks away. And in a strange bit of history, the building they were in used to be St. George's Episcopal Church, which was a mission of Memorial. But in the 1920s, when the neighborhood was rapidly changing, and this all-white St. George's Church was afraid of the Black families moving into the neighborhood, they left, and they tried to sell the building to a Black Baptist church so they could build a new building somewhere else. But they couldn't, because our members who helped them plant the church wrote into the deed that it could never be sold to a Black congregation. And so it was then given to the diocese, and then became a mission to the colored people, as it was called in the times, and it then became St. Catherine of Alexandria. So just fascinating how the stories intersect and weave together, and it became then an opportunity not just for Natalie and Steve to heal, but for Memorial and St. Catherine's to heal, and then also for our neighborhood, which is on one of the big boundary lines of redlining here in Baltimore, to begin to heal with the communities around it. So shortly thereafter, our neighborhood association actually changed their name from the Mount Royal Protective Association, which was the original name. Actually, it was founders of our church who founded this organization to stop Black families from moving into the neighborhood. They actually wrote the first housing segregation ordinance in the country that became the model for every other city, that went to the Supreme Court in the 1917, I believe. The law was written in our parish hall. And so they changed the name to the Bolton Hill Community Association, and have since begun doing a lot of both relationship building and also just outreach and service to the surrounding communities. And so it's been really wonderful to see this little story echo into bigger and bigger stories. And so that takes us into and then we had these big plans for 2020. Every church, I think, had big plans for 2020. And then the pandemic happened, and we didn't really know what to do. But strangely, reparations were not part of the plan. The plan was to, do a big renovation of the church and become much more of a traditional, social service organization, and be doing lots of programs and assistance and everything else. And then we just had to reevaluate everything because of the pandemic. And we recognized pretty quickly that all of the inequalities that we were seeing in Baltimore around COVID were not new. They were just brought to light because of this pandemic. And so that our response, both to that and to everything else, needed to be different, because we were in many ways responsible for the beginnings of structural racism and inequality here in Baltimore. And I can run down the list of things that we advocated for, but we tried to keep schools segregated. We tried to stop Black people from voting. We tried to keep houses segregated, hospitals segregated. Any institution that existed, members of our parish had fought to keep them segregated. Even to the point of environmental racism. Much of Black Baltimore suffers from a bad, antiquated sewer system that was never replaced, and lead paint from a whole bunch of housing related issues, that just problems that just got dumped on the Black community rather than seek to repair them. And those are problems that continue till today. And so that we began to wrestle in a different way with what our responsibility was going to be. And I think also we had done enough work and made enough relationships with St. Catherine's and with other Black-led organizations in the city, to know that we could enter into reparations in a way that would not feel cheap or attention-seeking or kind of flash in the pan, but that it was really going to actually repair and restore relationships. For us, the founding text for this is from Isaiah 58, that we're called to be repairers of the breach and restorers of the streets to live in. It's not a unique passage to us by any means. Lots of people are using this, I hope, as their frames. But for us, streets are so important because we're a church that people walk to, and we're a community that people walk in and know each other because they sit on the stoop and talk to each other. And so being able to understand the issues that we have caused and how to repair them is really important. So we began then to have these conversations about reparations. And then the summer of 2020, Breonna Taylor was killed by the police. That Aubrey was hunted down by an off-duty police officer in Georgia and killed. And George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis. And then about the same time, we were having this huge spark in Baltimore around the Gun Trace Task Force, which is a corrupt police unit that was able to operate with impunity for multiple years, and not just stole drugs and guns and money, but actively sold drugs in the city while blaming other Black people for it. And so there was, the need to be vocal and active rose to the fore even more. We had decided pre-pandemic that in terms of our internal space, we weren't going to do anything for the time being. We were just going to do some basic repairs, and then we'll work on the other stuff after we've got the exterior programs going. But Natalie just preached an amazing sermon in the summer of 2020, reminding us that we can't do anything out there until we take care of the stuff in here, both in the building and in our own hearts, right? That if we're still clutching our purses or afraid to cross the street to the Black neighborhood on the other side of the streets, then, and if we're too scared to make the changes internally to make others feel comfortable in our space, we have no business doing reparations or anything else. So shortly after that, the vestry voted unanimously to remove these two very large, 6 foot, 1.5 ton marble plaques from the rear of the church that were monuments to the founding rectors, and place them outside in the rector's garden. And then also to cover the painting. So if you look behind me, this is what the sanctuary looks like now. And there's a temporary painting in the middle by a local artist, Tyler Ballin. And that's Simon of Cyrene helping Jesus with the cross. But before, it looked like this. It was also Christmas before, obviously. Before it looked like this, and that's the Transfiguration, and it's just the whitest Jesus you can imagine in the middle. And this was a monument to a rector who served for 45 years. He was a private in the Confederate Army. And when he came to Baltimore, he was the chaplain to the Daughters of the Confederacy, the chaplain to the Confederate veterans. He consecrated 2 of the 3 Confederate monuments that were here in the city, one just a few blocks away from the church. And he led the church in a massive effort to keep things segregated and white. And he just said terrible things about Black people in newspaper articles and his own writings. He wrote a book about his time in the Civil War that he published in the 1910s that was just terrible. And so we covered that painting and are grateful to no longer have it sort of occupying that space, and looking forward to doing something like what you all have done with the cross behind Reverend Carlson, which is just gorgeous. I commend you all on that, both for taking that step and also just because it looks so good. So that's been about 25 minutes. I'll just say a few other things about what we did and then turn it over for questions. So in January of 2021, for our annual meeting, we began prepping the congregation in advance, obviously, about the need for reparations and how we might go about doing that in our own context. And so we decided that it was important for us to do something symbolic, but we're a small church with a small endowment. Our total endowment is less than $500,000. So we decided to take a 10% withdrawal from the endowment and ask the whole parish to vote on that. And they did so, and it was a unanimous vote during a virtual parish annual meeting. And we chose 10% really because it's a biblical tithe, but I think also just a way to symbolically show how much churches should think about giving. And then we decided to match that with the budget for 1 year, so to take it to $100,000 for 2021, and then commit to at least 4 years of matches for the next 4 years, so a total of $500,000. And that money is to go to support Black-led justice organizations in our zip code, so just in the area very close around the church. And working in 5 areas where we can point out that the church has done significant harm in the past. And I will be totally transparent that we had 4 areas. The 4 areas that we identified were housing, education, voting rights, and the environment. And then we had got an advisory group together of local justice leaders here, and the first thing they said to me and everybody was, "Where's criminal justice?" And when I said, well, we don't find, any record of that in our archives, it's not like we don't think it's a good thing. It just didn't come up. And they said, everything you've done, everything you talked about, Gray, was the process of criminalizing Black bodies, which has led to the criminal justice system that we have. And so the first thing that we had to do in our reparations work was to apologize and admit we screwed up and add a 5th pillar. And I think that's just, I think it should be emblematic of how we need to approach this, that this is not easy. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to offend people, and you're going to get offended. And the best response, is to say you're sorry and to apologize and to seek to make amends. I mean, reparations is about repairing broken relationships, and repairing broken communities. And we have a very, very broken community here in Baltimore. So we have an advisory committee that's advising us. We have a 10-person steering committee from the church, which is the sort of the hands-on people who will be going in and doing the work and building the relationships. And then we've just hired a full-time justice organizer to lead these efforts, both locally and then also advocacy work at the city and state level on key policy issues related to these 2 areas. So that's what we've done so far. Our first round of gifts were awarded earlier this year. We did a total of $25,000 in the first round. No, $30,000. $15,000 to a group called Black Women Build, which is sort of a habitat-like program, but it helps Black women own their first homes, and they work in the home and then take ownership of it. The $5,000 to a group called Build Bond, which is Building Our Nation's Daughters, that does work with women and with teenage girls and their moms, helping to build strong relationships between the 2 of them. They actually do this through like activity boxes, which is, I think, super cool, especially in the pandemic. You get a box to do an activity with your mom, and it's a fun thing, but there's also like a learning, component to it. And Atira Griffin, who's put it together, is just a remarkable person. And then 10,000 to our own diocese's reparations fund, because we also wanted to model for the other churches in the diocese that it's not just the diocese giving $1 million from their accounts. It needs to be all the churches that contribute to this. So that's what we've done so far, and happy to take any questions or talk about things that I forgot to say.
That is amazing. Wow. Actually, my first question is, when did you realize that the Holy Spirit had turned up in the middle of all of this? Because this is just such a
good question.
A spirit-led thing that happened. When did you first realize that God was in the mix?
So I did not come to Baltimore, as I said, with the intention of doing, reparations or justice work. I thought it would be sort of traditional urban ministry. Like I grew up in the Episcopal Church, the same stuff that we've always done. And so the first time I knew the Holy Spirit was involved, and this is going to sound bizarre, but I walked into the parish hall, and when I was getting a tour after I was officially here, and they have sort of the wall of shame, all the rectors on the wall, and so and the third one was William Bud Bodine, and I was like, well, that's weird. My grandmother's maiden name was Bodine, and I was like, well, I'll just I'll look it up. So I went on Ancestry later that night and discovered that this was a distant relative of mine who was the third rector of the place, and was also the only one of the first 9 who was not connected to the Confederacy. Which made me feel a tiny bit better about it. But I think just the many different ways all the stories have interconnected. From Natalie discovering this, her brother called her when she was sitting in the back pew right under Charles Ridgely Howard's plaque. From Steve and Natalie both being in the congregation, to just everything's kind of showing up at the right time, in the right place. And it's not always easy when you have the Holy Spirit with you, but when it feels like kind of the wind is at your back, that's a good sign.
Thanks. Donna and Melissa, why don't you chime in here?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gray. I loved listening to you. The first question I have is, how did you referred to this a little bit about you studied and you had a lot of book groups, and you couldn't agree, or you couldn't figure out to come to consensus about what the first step, how do you move from a place of studying and talking and thinking about it. And my question is, do you have any words of wisdom, suggestion about, was there a trick to that to get things moving?
So you can't see in the picture behind me, but when I got to Memorial, well, you can see, so you see the cross, and behind that was the painting. On the other side of this, which you can't see, when I got here, half the church were cathedral chairs and half the church were pews. Because at some point, half the church wanted chairs and half wanted pews, and so they just split the difference. And this is a church that has never made a decision.
You're laughing because
in its 160-year history.
Third pews. We also have the chair pew issue going on.
Yeah. And so I believe that institutions have DNA. Our church was founded in 1860. The building was finished in 1864. They didn't pay off the debt, which was to another Episcopal church, until 1894. And in those 30 years, they planted three or four churches. They built a school next door. They did all kinds of stuff in the community, but they just didn't want to pay off the debt. And those same patterns continue today. So I'd encourage you to look at like your own institutions. What is that institutional DNA? What's the story behind the third chairs and the 2/3 pews? And how are those things hampering you? That we there's something that is being said through that action or inaction, that we need to listen to, and then we need to vote to vocalize that, to get beyond it. If that makes sense.
You talked about the unanimous congregational meeting that was online and everyone voted, but I'm curious, kind of from who you were at the beginning to sort of where you were maybe at that point and another point, how much of the congregation was participating? Did you lose people? And you talked about when you arrived, sort of wondering, why is this congregation so white? How are we going to grow? Have you seen that begin to happen? That sort of shift that we all need to make.
And so, the ASA isn't the be all end all of any parish's vitality or life, but we were at 75 when I got here, and pre-pandemic we were at 110. So certainly had growth, and we have become much more diverse. We were probably 5% African American, and maybe a few other nationalities, ethnicities. And now it's close to 20%. We have a lot of I think our neighborhood attracts a lot of mixed race families and multicultural families, because we are on a border between white Baltimore and black Baltimore, and the parish has begun attracting the same kind of families that are living in the community. And we've also sought to be more just more inclusive of other voices and other styles. So we were changing the numbers, and I'll say a little bit about that in a second, but changing the leadership. So I have no control over who walks on this Sunday morning, but as a community, we do have control over who we appoint as our leaders. And so, when I got here, there were no Black people on the vestry, and now a third of the senior warden is a Black woman. We have a deacon, who Natalie is obviously an African American woman, and then I have proactively sought out other voices to preach, because we don't have an associate, we don't have a lot of a budget to hire more people, but I can bring in guest preachers, and we have had multiple interns from the diocese who are in the discernment process. And actually one of them joined the church after she was in discernment here as a trainee, and so she's regularly in the preaching rota as well. And so just seeking to diversify our leadership, and that in turn has led to more people feeling like this is a place they could have a home, because they see people like them on the altar and in the pulpit and on the website and in leadership. And the reason I'm less concerned about the numbers is that, Baltimore has a lot of historically Black churches, both Episcopal and otherwise, who have been vital resources in this community for the last 150 years. And they're all struggling. We're all struggling. If you're an urban church, and you don't have, a multi-million-dollar endowment, you're struggling. And, for me to go and try and, take parishioners away from one of those churches just to make myself feel better about, my own white guilt, that's certainly not reparations, right? That the goal, it's changing who we are and changing our relationship to those institutions, is more important than I think just the numbers in the pews.
Yeah. Did you have anyone get mad and leave because you were talking about the stuff that no one wanted to talk about that's in the past, and let's leave it alone?
Yeah, very few. We had, because when we began, messing with the music, and messing with the space and messing with the worship and messing with the preachers. And, certainly there were people who left, but, not a large number, and not anything that gave us pause. I think the one of the benefits of our church is that it is got to be one of the most progressive churches in the Episcopal Church. And so I can push the boundary a lot farther than other clergy can. When I get the most radical thing I can say from the pulpit on most Sundays is you have to love Trump voters. And that's a bit, I wholeheartedly believe that, but and most Episcopal churches, that would be a normal thing to say. For us, they're like, are you sure?
Right.
Yes, I do.
Melissa, did you want to ask anything else before I start looking in the chat?
Well, very quickly, and this is related to what Donna asked about effective outreach. And you said something in talking about making decisions about what does it look like to do reparations specifically. Like, what are you going to do? What ministries or what programs, community institutions are you going to support? Has outreach changed as a result of your work in the last few years? And if so, how?
It's become much more focused and much more local.
Okay.
That, we were, like a lot of churches would do, we'd be doing something to raise money for Central America one week and Africa the other week, and something, at the state level, or, that all over the place. And recognizing that we are a small church with a small budget, and we can be much more effective within this, square mile around our church than we can be in the broader community. And so and it doesn't mean we ignore everything else, but that's become much more relational, I should say. That that moving from transactional ministry to relational ministry, where we're doing things with people, building relationships with people. The first one of our big partners is a group called the No Boundaries Coalition, which is a group that seeks to unite a bunch of different neighborhoods that all intersect in kind of one central area. And they started as a block party. And so every year they have a big block party. And the first time that I said to the parish, okay, we're going to go to this block party. And they all said, okay, well, what are we going to do? You just go party. They said, we don't know, we're going to hand out literature. Do we need to fundraise for something? What's the mission? And we've moved beyond that to being like, oh, okay, we're going to go to the party. So my wardens called me the senior warden, junior warden called me last week and said, okay, we talked to the wardens at St. Catherine's. We want to do some work with them, but we just want to have fun. And I was like, oh, okay, well, if you say so. So that we just want to do things to enjoy each other's company and be with each other. So that's straight out of Acts 2. So I think we're okay biblically for that.
I love it. I wrote a whole doctoral thesis on exactly that model. I think that's exactly what we ought to be doing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's look at the chat. And you already answered the questions about if you had a pushback from your membership and how diverse your church is. Jackie wants to know, are you doing or planning any specified earmarked fundraising for this initiative? Because you said you were just taking it out of your budget. Are you raising money to do that, or how is that happening?
So we're raising money to do it. We're also looking at grant programs and other efforts that align with us. So trying to play within and outside the Episcopal Church, applying for grants that can be directed to this work. Also helping organizations apply for grants and serving as fiscal sponsors for smaller groups who are trying to do things. Using our space as a resource, not just for events, but for fundraising. We'd love to throw parties. So, can we do a fundraiser for the Black Women Build, or a fundraiser for Fresh at the Avenue? So that, and then we have a fund. It's the Guy Holiday Justice and Reparations Fund, and Guy T. Holiday he was 92, the oldest living member of our parish, who just passed away this past year, and had really dedicated his life to this kind of work. And so his wife generously agreed to let us, name the fund after him, and we'll continue to fundraise money for that. But I kind of suspect that after the first year and a half, it won't be an issue. It'll just be there.
It'll just be a thing. Jackie also wondered about how supportive your bishop and the rest of the diocese is.
I mean, I think our bishop. We were the first diocese to pass a reparations resolution at convention, and that was really at our bishop's behest. He testified on Capitol Hill in support of reparations. So he's been extremely supportive, and both encouraging us to keep going and keep pushing, and also to help push other congregations to support. At the same time that we did this, another church, which is one of the smallest churches in the diocese, committed to a 1.5% regular contribution from their budget into the reparations fund. And that's, it sounds like a small number, and it's a small dollar number because they're a small parish, but in perpetuity, that may end up being a much bigger investment in what we're doing. And so just we're always trying to find ways to model how churches can get involved in this. The way we've done it isn't for everybody. It works really well for us, but but every church does have a story, and every church does have a connection to the issue of the legacy of slavery, because it's the history of the country. And if we can understand our own history and respond to it and not shy away from it, then we're doing okay.
Oh, thanks. Pat wants to know, how do you decide which groups to award funding, and what questions or priorities guide your decisions?
Yeah, so we have an advisory committee and we have a steering committee, and we're really trying hard to not have this just be a grant program. So it's, we're not just like getting applications from groups and whoever hired the best grant writer gets the funding. We're looking at building relationships and supporting the work those organizations are doing. So, Black Women Build, for example, we started working with them last year during the pandemic. They had 3 clients who needed help with their down payments. And so I told the kids at the church that they could shave my head if we met the $9,000 goal, and we ended up raising $11,000. So because of the pandemic, it just ended up being my kids that could shave my head, but everyone was, certainly there in spirit. And so we've watched that project come along, because they are, they're working on a block that is 1 block from St. Catherine's Episcopal Church, and and we've really leaned into doing whatever we can to support St. Catherine's and helping to revitalize the neighborhood around them. And so Black Women Build is doing that. But we'll see where things go with the steering committee. But it's really about listening to the neighborhood. We've done 5 or 6 door knocking initiatives in the last year in the community, just getting to know people, not a real agenda. We've baked bread and gave out bread to folks. We did, COVID care packages early in the pandemic, and We've done a couple just trying to get people to go get vaccinated if they need help getting vaccinated. But really about, we're in kind of a process now of becoming present and then trying to figure out, what are those things just under the surface that where we can make a small investment can make a sizable difference, or a small investment can lead to a multiplier effect. So if we give, 15,000 to Black Women Build, for example, someone's going to come along and do 150,000 for a larger project, and we're involved in some conversations around that now.
I'm wondering, is there any fear on the part of your small and like you said, a struggling urban congregation when you took this step in faith? Was there any fear like you're going to run out of money for your own building, or you're going to run out of resources for your stuff?
So the way that I've said this to others, to our church, is that, look, if at the end of 5 years all we've done is spent $500,000, that will have been a failure. Because what this is really about is reorienting our lives, our souls, our energy, everything, our ministry, in a totally different direction. And so, the hope is that, within 5 years, we're not thinking about our stuff and their stuff. We're just thinking about the stuff that has to happen to keep the kingdom of God flourishing in this part of Baltimore. And so that we're not giving this away to help someone else out. We're doing this, for ourselves, for the collective here.
That's great. I don't see any other questions.
And, on the discrete infrastructure question, we're about to put air conditioning in the sanctuary, which hasn't happened in the 160 years beforehand. And that'll have been the first work done in the sanctuary in at least 40 years. So no, probably not 30, probably 38 years, because it was like the early 80s when they put the chairs in. So they don't really, they're not as concerned about, nearly concerned about the building as other people might be. Okay. And certainly not as much as the rector is.
Donna or Melissa, any other questions before we go?
I don't think so. I'm thinking lots of thoughts, but I don't have a lot of questions right now.
Yeah, I'm just really thankful. I really enjoyed what you had to say, and thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, we have just been so blessed to hear this story of Memorial and the journey you all have been on. It's just quite something, and I think a story that the whole wider church needs to hear.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very hopeful story on all kinds of levels.
It is, and you've inspired me to
certainly appreciate it. It's been a joy talking to you.
Yeah, I'm going to look up several things that you mentioned. So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gray. People should know that we're going to be making a contribution to the reparations fund at Memorial. So, do a little bit to help your work.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
And we'll keep you in our prayers.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, much appreciated.
All right, thanks for your time.
Have a great evening.
You too.